Elucidate. Und da sind wir nicht in Schaan, sondern da senden wir gleich nach Berlin. Elucidate wird auch auf Englisch pitchen, also wir werden heute Pitches 3 in Englisch, 5 auf Deutsch haben. Auch die Fragen übrigens, wenn Sie welche haben, können Sie auf Deutsch oder Englisch stellen. Und damit würde ich noch ganz kurz was zu Elucidate sagen, was Sie da erwartet, und dann senden wir rüber zu Berlin. Elucidate from Germany supports banks and other financial providers in the prevention and handling of compliance risks such as money laundering, fraud, and other criminal activities. And today we will hear live from Berlin from co-founder Shane Riedel. So Shane, welcome, and the stage virtually is yours.
Thank you very much, and good evening to all of you. It's my pleasure to be here. Just by way of a quick personal introduction, my name is Shane Riedel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Elucidate. My background is in finance, so most recently I was the head of risk and compliance for the financial institutions group within Standard Chartered Bank, and I got my start in finance with Goldman, based in Zurich and then London. I'm supported, or I work together with a team of about 25 people, primarily based here in Berlin, representing a mix of recovering bankers like me, as well as world-class engineers and data scientists. And we're all working together, to achieve a vision. And that vision for the company is to rid the earth of financial crime. Now, this is clearly an aspirational and ambitious objective, but in order to understand why we carry this conviction, I think it's important to understand the nature of the problem just a little bit. So today, financial institutions and banks are spending about 3% of their revenue to manage financial crime risk. And nevertheless, less than 1% of financial crime risk is thought to be detected. So that means 3%. So in the case of a bank like Citibank or JP Morgan, that's around $2 billion being spent to identify and prevent less than 1% of the illicit activity that runs over their portfolio. This is obviously unsustainable and represents a horrendous return on investment. This is also the reason why we see financial crime scandals every fortnight coming out in the press. It's our view that this is not a space that is ripe for optimization. This is a space that's ripe for change. And so for that reason, we've brought this product to market, or we've introduced this company to the market. So what do we do here? At Elucidate, we're a risk quantification platform. We provide a risk quantification platform, which is authorized and regulated by the BaFin and the ESMA, and represents the market's only authorized financial crime risk benchmark. So put a slightly different way, think of us like the Moody's of financial crime risk. Our approach represents a marked contrast to the subjective, judgmental, and manual approaches that financial institutions generally use to manage this risk today. So our proprietary model uses, we score and predict financial crime risk for a financial institution and its counterparties. And we enable those institutions to price and to mitigate that risk. And on the subject of pricing, which is really what's so critical, the nature of the pricing of risk is absolutely critical in this space, insofar as it will allow us to bring together commercial and risk and ethical objectives of banks in order to really change the status quo. So, suffice it to say, this is a critical issue for all financial institutions, and represents a top priority of institutions, regardless of their profile. I'm sorry, I think I'm having a bit of a hard time presenting my deck, but bear with me. So just to give a brief sense of how we do this, in essence, we take a data set which is provided to us by our users. That includes transaction data, customer data, employee data, control statistics, and so forth. And we use that data to quantify and score risk using a combination of impact and probability assessment. So anyone who's looked at credit risk models or operational risk models will find this to be quite familiar. Excuse me. We have a couple of objectives we want to achieve ahead of our Series A round, which is expected to take place later next year. Amongst those objectives, we intend to, number one, prove that we can be the industry standard in this space. So we've already become the only regulated standard, but over the coming year, we will move from our current coverage of about 10% of the market to around 20% market coverage, and enable a broader baselining and benchmarking across the industry. Secondly, we'll evidence the network effect. So one of our commercial hypotheses at the outset of building this product was that banks would nominate one another or invite one another to utilize the product. And indeed, we have found this to be true. We often say that our best salespeople are our users. Today, we have a 100% conversion ratio of banks who are invited to use our platform versus those who convert into paying subscribers. And we've set a target for ourselves of an R value of 3. That is to say, for every one bank that comes onto our platform, 3 additional banks will be brought on together with them. And then finally, to focus on user centricity and ease of integration. So we want it to be easy to use the platform and to provide support for our users to provide maximum amounts of data with as little manual intervention as possible. On the next slide, which you don't see, it goes a little bit into our commercial and regulatory validation, or perhaps you do. With our commercial and regulatory validation, we demonstrate that the use of the platform quite early on in our adoption has been quite robust. And here you can see several of the world's largest banks are already using the platform. And indeed, on the regulatory side, in addition to being regulated ourselves, entities such as the Bundesbank, Abu Dhabi Global Markets, and the Central Bank of the UAE are in various stages of product usage. And it's not just within the industry where this concept is gaining traction. So we also see within the investor community that our approach represents the consensus around the direction of travel. So recently in their newsletter, in their A16Z newsletter, Angela Strange, one of the partners there, outlined the need for a centralized network, a utility for the industry that would function akin to a credit bureau and enable institutions to ping this central utility to gain confidence in their counterparties, which is exactly what we've constructed. And finally, just to talk briefly about finances. So we were set up in 2018, and we spent the first 2 years bootstrapping using capital provided by our founders. We thought it prudent in June of this year, to go to the market and raise capital, and we did so, raising a 2.5 million euro seed round led by 11.2 Capital in San Francisco, and with the participation of CDEX. We subsequently increased our financing in October, taking on another 2.5 million euros, led by Frontline, based in Dublin. Our expectation is to raise our Series A once we've achieved the aforementioned objectives, most likely at the end of 2021 or beginning of 2022. With that, I will I'll pause, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Shane. Do you hear me all right?
I do. I hear you perfectly.
Wonderful. Okay, so we've had 2 questions come in for you, actually, and I'm gonna ask those 2, and I hope we can get into that. One is someone was really interested in the sort of what you presented on the risk crime factor, and particularly sort of how you calculate that. What are the criteria you use to get that more right than others?
Sure. So when we take the data from our users, and our users have actually been incredibly generous in providing data, much more than we anticipated, particularly given that banks are not necessarily known for their freedom in sharing of such data. We've taken that data and we've been able to derive quite a lot of information out of it. So what we found was that the status quo had the majority of financial institutions taking a very simplistic approach to managing this risk, i.e. something is low risk or high risk from a financial crime perspective. We introduced multiple themes within our financial crime risk rating that enabled banks and financial institutions to take a far more granular and constructive approach. So, for example, we tell them how much sanctions risk a financial institution represents, or how much customer risk, how much product risk. And in doing so, this enables our users to set clear risk appetites and to monitor those risk appetites in real time, and to proactively intervene when risk begins to emerge, as compared to waiting 3 years for it to come out in the press or for a regulator to contact them because of a problem.
And maybe just one follow-up question, because there's someone who's watching who has quite a lot of domain expertise and just also quite aware that there are a few other companies who are trying to, I guess, disrupt the same space.
Sure.
How are you different? And the companies he is comparing you to is Experian, FICO, Tone Beller Siren, and similar tools. So maybe you could just give a quick answer on what are sort of some of the top 3 key USPs that you have.
Yeah, for sure. There is no doubt that the RegTech vertical is a crowded one. And so for us, what really differentiates us is not the model, it's the network. It's the fact that we have proven that banks are prepared to use our platform as an intermediary between one another in order to understand risk based on data sets that they would not freely provide. So the more users we have, the more data we have, the more valuable we become to our users. And that's quite unique. We don't have sort of an on-site deployment model the way some entities do, and we take a much, much broader data set than is common amongst, say the credit ratings agencies or Experian or something, where they would have a smaller data set on individuals. Because our customers are primarily financial institutions, the data set is correspondingly much, much larger, from which we're deriving our conclusions.
Thank you so much.